I want to talk about the existence of God. You all need an outline. You can find it in the book of Genesis, but if not, there's some in the back if you would like one. I welcome everybody today. My throat feels like it's starting that cracking up business. And there's a mind of its own. The man, I want to talk about a man for a moment. The man that most Americans know as Mark Twain. That was his pen name, as all of you know. History remembers him both as an adventurer as well as a wily intellectual. He was born Samuel Langhorne Clements in Florida in 1835. And he was raised along, as you've read, all of you, through junior class literature or whatever year it was in your school. He was raised on the Mississippi River in Hannibal, Missouri. He died in 1910. But as a young man, Samuel unfortunately saw too much of the dark underbelly of life. At the age of 9, he witnessed a local man murder a cattle rancher in a dispute over money. At 9. At age 10, he watched an owner beat his slave to death with a piece of iron. At 10. At 10, usually most of us are just waiting for the good humor truck to come by. At age 12, his own father died, and Samuel, or Sam, laid his own father in the grave. He was kind of on his own after that. If any of you have done any of the reading of him, and he had to learn how to fend for himself. He traveled everywhere, and life threw at him a lot of stuff. He became a riverboat pilot at the age of 19, up and down the Mississippi. He traveled out west during the gold rush. He became an author, and then a journalist, and then an explorer, and an entrepreneur, and even an inventor. And when Samuel Clements, or Mark Twain, wrote his observations about people, and about life, and about the claims of organized religion, his writings were blunt, sometimes comical, but almost always cynical. As Twain grew older, his finances were not handled well, and they failed, and he began to get more and more fearful and bitter over the prospect of poverty. He grew increasingly pessimistic, and his deep down feelings were that human existence is a cosmic joke perpetuated by a chuckling God. A malevolent being, he referred to God as, who was just up there somewhere, toying with us, chuckling at our misery. That's the way he put it, which may explain why he penned, and I don't have this on the overhead, but if you'll listen, he said, "Strange, a God who could make good children as easily as bad, yet preferred to make bad ones, who made them prize their bitter life, yet stringently or stingily cut it short, that life. A God who mouths golden rules and forgiveness multiplied 70 times 7, and yet invented hell, who mouths morals to other people, but has none himself, who frowned upon crimes, yet committed them all, who created man without invitation, then tries to shuffle the responsibility for man's evil acts upon man, instead of honorably placing it where it belongs upon himself. And finally, with altogether divine obtuseness, invites his poor, abused slave he has made to worship him. Now that's pretty cynical, don't you think? A God, Twain insisted, who makes human existence a cosmic joke, as I said, and chuckles all the way. Now, where did all of that begin? And why? Twain was raised in a strict Calvinistic home, but he became one of those Americans who rejected Christianity. And throughout his adult life posed tough questions for Christians like, faith is believing something you know ain't true. Or, the Bible is a mass of fables and traditions, mere mythology. By the way, through all of this cynicism, he's acknowledging there is a God. Or, what I found amusing, frankly, if Christ were here now, there's one thing he would not be, and that's a Christian. Well, I don't know about that. This morning, we're launching into a kind of a mini series, I guess, of messages for the next few weeks. And I've entitled it Apologetics, Defense of the Truth. And do we have answers for some of the, I think, tough questions of life? Because more and more people, including the younger generation, if you've been watching the tube at all this last week, you've seen over and over again the tragedy of Charlie Kirk being politically assassinated. A guy that loved young people, devoted his life to young people, and would, without fear and with joy, would go in the midst of almost the pits of hell in order to share the good news of Jesus Christ. More and more young people are finding there's no end here. There's no purpose here. And they believe that abandoning the Christian worldview is a good thing. And it's not. That the Bible has outlived its usefulness, which it hasn't. That science has trumped today, which it hasn't. That talking about right and wrong is no longer relevant, which is not true. Do Christians and the God that we claim to represent, does he have good answers for the tough questions that come our way? And can we answer them? And if some of these tough questions have not come into your life so far, which I would doubt, it certainly will come. And it'll come in the way of our young people that see no hope. So over the next couple of weeks in our teaching series, I want to challenge us to not only love the Lord our God with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our strength and with all of our mind. For us to be able to take our Bible, square our shoulders, and dig, so that we can say together, you know, we've done some prayerful and careful thinking, and we've discovered that we know a great God who has great answers for the toughest questions. So, here's a question for this morning, and perhaps for next week. Does God really exist? Or we might put it this way. As a supreme being, an intelligent, a powerful, personal being, clearly and sufficiently provided proof that he exists. Can evidence for his existence be demonstrated and comprehended? And more personally, can this supreme being be known? So in the time we have, I want to begin tackling this question. And in order to do this, I've chosen to key on three key realities that I think will help us to answer that question. And our first reality let us remind ourselves about how we know what we know. How do we know what we know? How do we acquire knowledge? How do we discern with that knowledge what is true and what is false? How do we know how to answer the challenges and the arrows that are slung at the believers from time to time? How do we know are they right or are they wrong? How do we know what is true and what is real? Of all the living entities that populate the universe that we live in, there is no doubt that human beings are the most remarkable in our capacity to know and to understand and to see what we see and to process that, and we'll talk about this more, and process that to where we have an understanding and then can put it to use. A couple of interesting things. Recently, the author David Russell Schilling reported on a lecture given by Harvard University neuroscientist Jeff Leachman. And Leachman, who is attempting to map the human brain. How does it work? What stimulates it? What's its capacity? What's its limitations? What can be done? Now, Leachman has calculated that the human brain, it would take several billion petabytes of data storage would be needed to index the entire brain. By the way, one of the tenets of the evolutionists is that man evolves to his greater good based on his need. And they forget to tell us that we only use about 30% of our brain on average now. So we have that capacity way beyond. So we'd have to evolve a lot more to catch up with where we are. Petabyte. Did you know what a petabyte is?
No.
It's something like a gigabyte. No. A petabyte. I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up. A chettabyte. Petabyte is equal to 1,000 terabytes. You didn't think I knew. A terabyte. Now a terabyte, it's interesting, is the equivalent to 1,000 gigabytes. Everybody knows what a gigabyte is, do we not? Now, how many gigabytes does your computer have? Mine's got 16. This computer here's got 16 gigabytes. You can get them with more power. So that computer, 1,000,000 gigabytes, you could record and store 3 billion encyclopedias. 3 billion encyclopedias. That's a lot of encyclopedias. That's what the human brain is. The numbers involved are so astronomical and astounding, especially when considering the size of the human brain. Some of us have bigger heads than others. Some have something in those bigger heads.
I think mine's leaking.
Yeah, it has for a long time. You know, I think that's where I've lost my height. It's all out of my brain shrinking. Yeah. When you consider the size of the human brain and the number of neutrons in it, which means that even though human knowledge is doubling about every 13 months, maybe faster right now, that is the knowledge in the world is doubling about every year. There's still, and by the way, it's expected to double, so I read. The capacity of the brain of the information in the world is expected to double in pretty soon every 12 hours. And there's plenty of capacity in the human brain to take care of that. In some of you. Not with me. You know, we have this incredible capacity to observe and the capacity of observing and cataloging, processing information, and then making conclusions. Charlie Kirk used to love to go outside and just be outside and enjoy it. I hope you do. I do too. I like going outside. I like sitting on my patio and looking out and having Norma bring me a mint julep. She doesn't, by the way. But to observe, and I honestly believe, I don't know how a rational human being that's honest cannot look at creation as part of what we're going to talk about and not realize that somebody made this. We'll talk about that more. It's called a contingent. There's always a contingency. It's things. This piece of paper didn't just happen, right? There's contingency behind it. Where did it come from? Where it came from? A tree. Okay, where did that tree come from? Probably an acorn. Where did that acorn come from? So we'll talk more and more about that as we go. It's a major point, I think, in our understanding of what God is doing in our lives. You are the most remarkable, complex, capable entity of the universe by God's creation. Because we are made in the image of God. And we have this marvelous ability to express all that we've discovered, all that we discover each day in little things and big things, and concluded in 1,000 or more intelligent languages around the world. Every day, you draw countless valid conclusions about what is real, what is actually there, and what is not real. And you process that. What is true and what is not true. We understand cause and effect. Something happened. Norm and I were working on reinstalling our window pane in our full-length window pane in our door. You take it out and put a full-length thing, so it's heavy. And she's holding it, and it's two old fools that shouldn't be doing these things. Anyway, she's holding it in on there, and I'm trying to stagger out of it, and I step on her, and I fall, and I just beat the pudding out of that floor with my buttocks and my back of my head. Fortunately, safe points both. So, like this, so if I walk around with a limp, you know what's going on. But I know better, is my point. And there's a cause and effect. All right? I didn't just fall. What, I stepped back, I tripped, I stepped back. So there's a cause and effect in these things. We understand cause and effect. When you see order, we conclude that something or someone has made the arrangement. Right? When I looked at a big, beautiful tulip field, that didn't just happen, did it? Just one morning they decided there'd be tulips there. Somebody planted tulip bulbs. Somebody invented tulip bulbs. When we encounter design, we rightly conclude that there is an intelligent designer behind whatever has been designed. Right? Behind an engine is an engineer. Behind a building is a architect, builder. Behind a watch is a watchmaker. The philosopher Francis Schaeffer, more than 50 years ago, wrote a great book, The God Who Is There. By the way, this has nothing to do with the lesson, but I'm reading an interesting book on the president and the slave. And it's about President Lincoln and, what is it? Oh my goodness gracious. Douglas. What's his first name? The slave.
Frederick.
Huh?
Frederick.
Thank you. Frederick Douglass. Interesting parallelisms within their lives. Very, very well written. Created in God's image, we are rational and logical. And as such, able to and intended to explore and discover further truth concerning creation. God says, in effect, learn of the truth that I have made in the external world. By the way, I told you all that Norman and I, a week and a half ago, went down to Billy Graham Training Center to listen to Ken Ham speak on the first 11 chapters of Genesis. He maintains, and I certainly agree with him, that if you can gather the knowledge of those first 11 chapters, you'll solve about 98% of your questions about doctrine, how the earth was created, who God is, what's expected of us, what's their problem, how to solve that problem, and on. And so our processes of discovery, what we can call science, the process of discovering things, how do things work. We can catalog the what goes on in our world and universe and how physical things work. What causes what? And we can use those discoveries to manage our physical life, hopefully, and make living better for the world rather than destructive. But our science, though it is very capable of discovering the what, can never tell us how all that exists came into being in the first place. It can tell us the what, but not the how, and definitely not the who. We know, obviously from personal experience, that everything that is here, well, let me back up and sort of rephrase that. We know that something is here rather than nothing. I know that this is here. I I know this is here because Jesus said, don't take it, or he will get you. Okay. And that what is here is incredibly designed, and that it's incredibly complex. And all physical things, we've discovered, are contingent. I'm using that word again. It's contingent on something prior. That is, that whatever we have here is the result of a sufficient cause. And so who or what that sufficient cause is, we need to determine. Now, I think this points brilliantly to something that you have in your Bibles, and I want you to look at it for a moment. Two of the most important verses in the Bible that you might ever read and think about. You say, well, Dick, there's a lot of those, and there is. But I think this is very important. I want you to look at Romans 1. I'm going to read from the ESV. You will follow in your book. Read these verses in light of the question, God, have you proven that you exist? This is your question. Now let's see God's answer. What can be known about God is plain to them, speaking of men and women, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things which have been made, so that they, men and women, are without excuse. Any ambiguity there? Any confusion there? Is God telling you anything there? He says, look, I created and I have shown myself, and we'll see as we look in Psalms later, he continually shows himself through continuous revelation. He's saying, I created your heavens and earth, and I was there. I was the cause of the creation of the world. Let me illustrate this very simply. Don't be too bored with this. About an event that took place about 30 years ago in my career. Happened in one of my previous churches. I just never could keep a job. And it happened in my previous church, First Baptist Church in Lorton, Virginia. I came to the church one day and needing to do some deacon work and to work on Sunday school preparation. And there was a box sitting outside the church door. And there was a note taped to the top of it. Someone that's put it there, and it said, Dick, if you have time, could you put this together? The pastors have all the time in the world to do everything. Well, in fact, I didn't either have the time nor the inclination to put that thing together. You guys remember back in 40 years ago when Christmas presents came in boxes like that, and on Christmas Eve you spent inordinate amount of time cursing. No, inordinate amount of time putting things together. Well, I didn't have the time, but I knew someone might, and so I passed the note along to Harold Dotson. Harold was a deacon in my church. There were 3 generations of Dotsons, Dotson Senior and Mrs., and Harold and Mrs., and then Harold's son, Roger, and a girl, daughter. Harold came, he opened up the box, and what he found inside of that beautiful box, so well decorated, he found an 11-page instruction sheet, 2 pre-assembled vertical side pieces, 2 horizontal pre-cut shelf panels, 4 horizontal rail pieces with pre-drilled holes, 2 lattice-type front and back railings, 12 long bolts, 2 shorter bolts, 4 nylon washers and 14 metal nuts, also a small hex Allen wrench. So in all, 43 different pieces, all neatly packaged together. And so he unpacked it all, and he just laid it out. And within about a half an hour, that stinking Harold had put it all together. Assembled it all. It would, I told Naomi it would take me a day and a half to do that. So here you see a picture of him putting that together. And there's the finished product of that. Now you can see this changing table. And by the way, you can see it in person. Not you men, because it's in the upstairs ladies' bathroom of my former church, I think. I haven't been back there lately. Now you see the changing table. Pretty, isn't it? Nice, functional. It had 2 things that you can conclude from this, and this is the point of drawing this out. This is how it works. Okay? You take the pieces, you go step by step, right, through the assembly process. First this, then this, one thing fits into another, and it all gets tightened together. With me, I always have 6 screws left over. I never know why. And you know what I mean, David. So, and you put it all together and you've got a changing table. That's what science tells us. You can observe something, you can see how it fits together, how it was designed, how it's supposed to function. But number 2, there's something else that I think you need to automatically can conclude, and that is that this was designed by somebody. Somebody developed those 43 pieces and said, if you do this, and this, kick it 3 times, then you'll have something. You can't go into that woman's restroom and see that piece of furniture and say, wow, aren't we lucky that this thing happened overnight? It wasn't here yesterday, and now it's here today. Hallelujah, evolution is great. It evolved from nothing. Don't we say that? Don't we look around as a society in many, many circles and say, how could this beautiful, marvelous, complex thing have happened? Well, somehow a tree was growing, and somehow, some way it fell over, and incredibly something sharp came along and cut it all up into these amazing crafted pieces that somehow, some way came together over the course of millions of years of time, and now it's sitting in the bathroom right here in our church. Now, even with a relatively simple 43-piece changing table, simple for Howard and you maybe, you can conclude 2 things without any question whatsoever. This is how this thing works. I'm reiterating. And someone designed it. When you go out of here today, you look out and you see the forest, you see the sky, at night you'll see the stars, and you'll say, wow, somebody made that. Somebody put that all together. So what does the Apostle Paul mean? In Romans chapter 1, verse 20. So what does the apostle mean that he writes, in his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, listen, in the things which he has made. He means that all of us who live in a complex world of cause and effect discover these things not only to say, wow, also we innately ask, who done it? We've been made to discover the design of the what, and then to ask who. Look at this beautiful thing. How did this come about? That leads us to the second. Well, I don't know. I really want to start that. But the second reality I want us to pick up on. And that is that the truth is that God, a supreme being, has openly demonstrated that he is there. The evidence of a supreme being's existence are clear and compelling. And we're going to, beginning in